Hello! I'm Elaine, and I'm a tour guide in the French Quarter. I do ghost tours. And I am not going to tell you the stories that I tell on my tour, because you gotta pay for those. But if you want to hear some interesting things that have happened to me while I'm leading random drunk people around the French Quarter, I got you. When I first started as a tour guide, the list of rules that I did at the beginning of each tour was relatively short and basically boiled down to don't be an asshole. But I realized as I worked that it turns out there are other things that grown adults need to be told not to do in public. And one of the rules that I do every night that almost always garners a question is, please, for the love of God, keep your hands out of your and all other guests' underwear for the entire duration of the tour. And the question people often have is, why do you have to say that? And it all stems back to one tour. There was a tour that I was dividing a group with another tour guide, and as soon as people started gathering, it became very clear that there was a loud bachelorette party, there was a pretty loud bachelor party, and then everybody else was relatively quiet couples. So that's an easy tour to divide. Bachelors and bachelorettes are going to go together, and everybody else goes together. And I volunteered as tribute and took the louder groups because I'd had a quieter night before. And as soon as I take my group away and I start the rules, I look up and realize that one of the couples is with me too. And so I pause, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, you misunderstood. I'm having the bachelors and bachelorette party. Everybody else is going with the other guide. And they're like, oh no, we want to go with you. And I'm like, well, this is going to be the slightly louder group, so that's why we wanted y'all to go with the others. And they're like, oh, but we're friends with the bachelorettes. And meanwhile, the bachelorettes are giving me looks like, no, they aren't. But I'm not very well going to call them out in the middle of the road. So I'm just like, we're under the right number of numbers. We're fine. We'll go. And I start the rules, and they are making out more than they are listening. And this is not even subtle making out. They are like teenagers in the back of the bus. But also that's usually a sign that they're going to leave quickly. So I figure no biggie. Who cares? But I did notice that it was clearly making some other guests visually uncomfortable, but I mean, it's just PDA. There's not much I can do about it unless they become actively disruptive. So I finished the first stop and head off to the second. And as soon as I launch into the second stop, well, first I want to tell you, the second stop on this tour is a violent, gruesome, true crime story. There is absolutely nothing sexy about it. But I noticed that this couple is standing off to just a little bit off the side, like not away from the group, just on one side of the group, heavily making out. And they are wiggling in such a way that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And like the people near them are giving them looks. The people across the half semicircle are giving them looks. Like everybody is giving them looks. And I'm just trying to focus on telling a story here. And also, like, once again, it's still just PDA. There's not much I can do about it. But between that stop and the next one of the bachelorettes comes up to me and is like, hey, is there anything you can do about them? And I'm like, what's going on? And she says, he's had his hands in her ass for the last 5 minutes. And I'm like, oh, okay. That is something I can do something about. Except, honestly, what the hell am I supposed to do about it? No one ever told me in training what to do when people are practicing sex acts on each other in the middle of my tour. So when we get to the next stop, I sort of just give an announcement before I get started. Hey guys, remember, we're in public, and I need you to respect everybody else in the tour. And I'm giving it as a general announcement because that way it tends to prevent people from getting mad when they realize you're talking directly to them. And also they try to once again park themselves in the back. And I'm like, oh, y'all come up here. And I literally wave them right in front of me in the hopes that, being observed will correct their behavior. But no, it does not. During that entire stop, the guy is making aggressive eye contact with me while the girl is running her hand up and down across the obvious bulge in his pants. And I'm sitting there trying to tell a story while someone is giving another person an over-the-clothing hand job directly in front of me. So needless to say, at this point, I'm super uncomfortable, and I finish that stop, and what's running through my head is, we're crossing Bourbon Street. We are crossing Bourbon Street. These crazy motherfuckers are going to leave at Bourbon Street. And I decide that if they do not leave at Bourbon Street, I'm going to have to directly take them aside and address this. So we keep walking. The bachelorette is furious and is talking to me about, like, you should kick them off. And I'm like, if they're still here at the next stop, I'm going to talk to them and warn them that if they don't stop, they're going to have to leave. But when I get to the next stop, I don't see them. I'm like, okay, perfect. Then they come waltzing up. It seems they were just a couple of feet behind the rest of the group. And they try to park themselves right in the middle of the bachelorettes. And so I sort of like wave them aside. I'm like, hey guys, come over here for a second. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take them to the side so that I can politely explain to them that they need to stop this shit. But at this point, the bachelorette has lost her temper. And so she just starts screaming at the top of her lungs, you need to go back to your hotel room. This is not appropriate. Who the hell taught you it was inappropriate to do sex acts on each other in the middle of the street? And the guy is looking at me like, are you going to let her talk to me about like this? And I'm like, yeah, I actually am. And I sort of look at him and go, honey, we did not consent to this. You need to either stop or leave. And he's like, I'm not doing anything. I'm like, yes, you are. I have numerous witnesses. You are practicing sex acts in the middle of my tour. And he's like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, kick you off of the tour. You need to leave. And it takes a while, but eventually he does walk away down the street, screaming about me being rude. All the while, yes, his hands were in her ass. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for listening.